Today's lesson, I don't want to teach for 2 hours. And sometimes you say, well, time doesn't matter. But when you're trying to watch something back on stream or whatever, 2 hours can be a long time. But I have a lot to say today. So I may not teach all of the mitzvahs that are numbered there on the board because the Most High has apprised me of something that is very, very, very critical. And today I have to tell you. We have been teaching the history of Israel and all the facets that surround the beginning of Israel, the failures of Israel, the various nuances and sequences of Israel, the nation of Israel. We have given you some historical pointers and some information that's connected to Israel that have been enlightening and been apropos. We have spent time teaching you or trying to teach you the Hebrew language itself, the Hebrew alphabet, and so forth, and we call that Torah. The Hebrew language is important to us and understanding it in the context that as we read Scripture, we're able to go back to the original language and see exactly what has been said. But as far as being able to learn it, know it, understand it, knowing the consonants, the vowels, the shorshims, the Most High has allowed me to know that that is not the principal issue with Torah. Not only is it not the principal issue with Torah, it is not Torah. As I've been studying the mitzvahs, he has opened up for me a understanding that is critical to what Torah really is. We've taught the failures of Israel. We've taught the prophets and how the prophets speak to Israel in light of their failure of obeying the Most High. And we've taught the future plan of the Most High in relationship to Israel, but we have not taught Torah. I'll say it again. We have not taught Torah, and that's my fault. It's my fault to a degree because there's a process of learning. As we go through the process of learning, we have adopted ourselves to following a pattern and a trend that has been associated with the Ashkenazis, which is to teach Torah portions. Within the Torah portions, we've tried to explain the nature and the history of what's there, but we've overlooked the principal part of the Torah portions. To say that within the first 5 books of Scripture, which is the compilation of Torah, inside those Torah portions resides Torah. So now the question becomes one: what is Torah? Well, let's begin by going back to Devarim chapter 4. I don't have it posted because the Most High has downloaded this to me since I did the PowerPoint. But I want to take you back to chapter number 4 of Davarim, and let's listen to what Moshe says to Israel. Let's listen to what he says. Now, Israel, listen to the laws and rulings I am teaching you in order to follow them so that you will live. What does he say? I teach you what? Listen to what? Listen to laws and rulings that I'm teaching you. Verse 5. And he says in verse 2, in order to obey the mitzvahs of Yahweh, your Elohim, which I'm giving you. Do not add to what I'm saying, and do not subtract from it. Do not add to the mitzvahs that I'm giving you. Do not subtract from them. That's what he's telling us. Verse 5, he says, look, I have taught you what? Laws and rulings, just as Yahweh my Elohim ordered me, so that you can behave accordingly in the land where you are going in order to take possession of it. Therefore, do what? Observe them, follow them, for them all peoples will see you as having wisdom and understanding. When you hear of all these laws, they will say, this great nation is surely wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that Yahweh as close to them as Yahweh our Elohim is, wherever we call on him? What great nation, listen to what he's going to say in verse 8. What great nation is there that has laws and rulings just as this entire Torah, which I am setting before you today? Are you hearing what he's saying? Are you hearing Moshe explain to us what Torah is? Moshe is not teaching the children of Israel their culture. I mean, their failures, their all of the things that they've done along the way. He's not teaching them that. He's teaching them, and he says, laws and rulings, and he calls it the Torah. We go down to verse number 13. He proclaimed his covenant to you, which in order for you to obey the 10 words. Well, what are the 10 words? We have to go back to Exodus chapter 34 and verse 28. If we go to Exodus 24 and verse 28, you're going to find in that particular writing the 10 words that he speaks to us that comprise, and he says, and those 10 words he wrote on the 2 stone tablets. So now the next question we have to ask ourselves is this: what was in the Mishkan, and what was in the now my brain just went froze. That he placed in the seat where the cherubims overlaid it, the Ark of the Covenant. What did he put in the Ark of the Covenant? He didn't put in the Ark of the Covenant the history of Israel. He put in the Ark of the Covenant the Torah, the laws and the rulings that the Most High had given him. If we go back to Exodus chapter 20, which are the 10 utterances, which are not the commandments. They are the ketubon, which the Most High gave to Israel, whereby he married Israel and had become his wife and became his people. We go on into the next chapter of reading, and he continues with giving them laws, rules, and regulations. So the Torah is the compilation of laws, rules, and regulations. At that time, verse 14 says, Yahweh ordered me to teach you laws, rulings, so that you would live by them in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. All right? So he's laid out, and then he gets to the end of Devarim, when he's told Israel and rehearsed once again all of these laws and all of these rulings. He says to Israel, you are to make a copy of what it is that I have taught you so that you can have it for yourself. Did he not say that? So he's not telling Israel to write down the journey from their origin, all of their figures in between. He's asking them to write down laws and rulings which are a reflection of the Torah, the Torah, or the compilation of the Torah. Now, to support that position, we have to go to another place in our study, which takes me now to our board. If I go to the board, we're going to look at some things to support the position that I have just shared with you. That starts in Psalms 119. Psalms 119, David's writings give us certain things that we should be able to understand and deduce from David's language what Torah really is. Let me just go there for a minute. Got them up on the board, but I want to go somewhere here. When we go to Psalms 119, 119 is going to read in this fashion. And I want you to hear what's being said, because I'm going to break it down for you in terms of what's there. How happy are those whose way of life is blameless, who do what? Who live by the Torah of Yahweh, who live by it. In order to live by something, there has to be some rules, some laws, and some regulations. How happy are those who observe his instruction, who seek him wholeheartedly. They do no wrong, but live by his ways. Verse 4, watch what he says. You laid down precepts for us to observe. May my ways be steady by observing your laws. Then I will not be put to shame, since I will have fixed my sight on all of your what? Mitzvahs. He didn't say fix your sights on your past. He didn't say fix your sights on how you came out of Mitzrayim. He didn't say fix your sights on all of our failures, but fix your sight on all of your mitzvahs. I thank you with my sincere heart as learning your righteous rulings. I will observe your laws. Don't completely abandon me. Now, I've given you a piece of what Psalms 119 says. 119 backs us back to Devarim chapter 4, where Moshe is explaining to Israel what it was that the Most High instructed him to teach. Let's look. definitions and synonyms associated with Psalms 119. What are precepts? The synonyms of precepts are teachings, rulings, instructions, laws, dictums, and commandments. They are a general rule intended to regulate behavior and thought. Torah is there to help us regulate behavior and thought. Well, what are laws? Laws are commandments, regulations, ruling, directives. It is the system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. Precepts, laws. We're talking about what Torah is and what Torah is not. Mitzvahs, what are they? A precept or commandment, rulings, verdicts, judgments, declarations, decrees, an authoritative decision or pronouncement, especially one made by a judge. Who is our judge? The Most High. So the Most High has given us rulings and mitzvahs and precepts and laws. Psalms, Philium 119, the olive. We look at this and we say, well, what does the olive have to do? Because all 22 consonants are invoked in Psalms 119, and all 22 consonants are going to talk about one subject. They're going to talk about precepts, mitzvot, laws, statutes, and the commandments, and David is going to respond to them in light of calling them the Torah. So the question that comes to my mind that he hit me with was, well, what have we been teaching in the past that we call Torah? It wasn't these. You know what? I would wager that the majority of Israel, Hebrew Israel, to this day, and I don't care who you are, where you are, and what you call yourself, I would wager today that we probably only know about maybe 20 of these mitzvot, laws, rulings, precepts, and concepts that the Most High has given to us as the principal way of life and governance for what He has made for Israel. We know the Shabbat, we know Passover, we know the seven feasts, we know not to light a fire, we know this, we know that, but we don't know Torah. We know how to live in this nation that we live in. We know how to drive our cars. We know what the stoplights that we take a test at DMV. DMV runs us through a test, and we have to pass the test of a number of laws in order to drive a car in these United States. And there are more than 20. The Most High has a multiplicity of laws, rulings, precepts, statutes, and concepts and governance for the kingdom that He has made for Israel. But Israel does not know what they are and how to apply them as a way of life. We don't know. Moshe told Israel, the Most High told me to do what? Teach you what? Laws, rules, mitzvos, and Torah. He didn't tell me to teach you about your failures. He didn't tell me to teach you about all the things that are a part of what we as a nation have come about to do. He told me to teach you. And Moshe said, and this is what I have done. So we look at the beginning of Psalms 119, and we have the olive, which is a symbol of the ox, which depicts strength. Therefore, the 119th Psalm begins by teaching us that which we need to engage in study, that we must study the mitzvahs in order to subsequently perform them properly, watch this now, and be strengthened by them. That's their purpose, is to strengthen us by them. Psalms 119, he opens with, how happy are those whose way of life is blameless, who do what? Who live by the Torah of Yahweh. How happy are those who observe what? His instructions, who seek wholeheartedly. They do nothing wrong, but live by his ways. Whose ways? His ways. So it appears to me that the writer of 119 Psalms is saying, this is something that I need to learn and I need to know. We know our failures. We know how we came out of, how we were enslaved in Mitzrayim. We know about the nation of Israel, but what we don't know that we need to be taught are Torah instruction and ways. You lay down your precepts. I gave you a definition of precepts for us to observe with care. May my ways be steady in observing your laws. Then I will not be put to shame, since I will have fixed my sight on what? On your mitzvahs. What are we teaching now? We're teaching mitzvahs, right? We're no longer talking about who shot the dog and how Korach went into a pit because he got beside himself and violated principles of Torah. We're no longer talking about how Israel fought a war and won a war. That's not the principal issue. The principal issue is that if we don't understand these, the rulings of the kingdom that we're supposed to be a part of and the king that we're supposed to be observing, then we're missing. We are still doing something that's very critical, and it's called what? Missing the mark. And we said missing the mark was what? Torah. I thank you with a sincere heart as I learn your righteous rulings. I will observe your laws. Don't completely abandon me. Now, in this dissertation, I'm going to give you snippets of 119 down to the Zion. The bet, the beasts, 9 through 16, teaches us that we must apply Yahweh's word to solve problems in every area of our life. So he begins with saying in 9, how can a young man keep his way pure? By what? By guarding it according to your word. I will seek you with all my heart. Don't let me stray from your what? Mitzvahs. But you see, if I don't know the mitzvahs, what am I going to do? I'm going to stray from them because I don't know them. I treasure your word in my heart. When he says I treasure your word in my heart, he's talking about Torah. So I won't sin against you. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Teach me, he says, what? Do what? Teach me your what? Laws. I proclaim with my mouth all your rulings you have spoken. I rejoice in my way at your instruction more than any kind of wealth. I will meditate upon your precepts and keep my eyes on your ways. I will find my delight where? In your regulations. What's he talking about? What's he talking about? What's he talking about? He's talking about Torah. He's not talking about the past. He's not talking about the history of Israel. He's talking about the things that the Most High has given to Israel as a way of life, of a governance of their nation. The Gimel. The gimel is indicative of kindness. Therefore, it opens with bestowed kindness, or according to our translation, as our text is, generosity. So he says, deal generously with your servant, then I will live and observe your word. Open my eyes that I might do what? What do I need to see? I need to see open my eyes so I can see your Torah. So we know now that Torah is directly related and tied to what? The mitzvahs and the commandments the Most High has given Israel. Though I'm just a wanderer on earth, don't hide your mitzvahs from me. I am continually consumed with longing for your rulings. You rebuke the proud, the cursed you stray from, you rebuke the proud, the cursed who stray from your mitzvahs. So now we understand something that we haven't understood before. We have done some great teaching. We have done some awesome teaching in this house. There has been some awesome things that the Most High has showed us. But if we don't get these, if we don't learn the governance that governs our and who we are, then we're missing the boat by a long shot. You might say, well, what's the purpose of all of this? There is a statement that comes out of the book of Hebrews, which our Kohanim Appleton brought up so clearly, and I cannot escape from it. It says in the Hebrew writing that the things that the Most High were weak and inefficient and did not bring us to the goal. Well, here's the problem. You're listening to an individual who is Greek in mind, Greek in culture, Greek in understanding, and does not have a clue what the Most High has planned for Israel and his people. And I'm going to say it to you, and I want you to hear me very clearly. You and I cannot understand and walk with a Hebrew Elohim operating with a Greek thought. It does not work. Said it before, let's say it again. If you haven't read Daniel chapter 7 and you don't know who the 8 beast anti-Elohim nations are, then you're ignorant. You're ignorant. And if you've accepted the narrative that they're okay, you're more than ignorant. Because Greece and Rome are 2 diabolical nations that are anti-Elohim. I'm going to put it in your Christian terms. They're anti-Christ and anti-God nations. So if they're anti-Christ, anti-God nations, or for us Hebrews, they're anti-Elohim nations and they're anti-Israel nations, that means that everything that they have to say is designed to destroy you and separate you from your Elohim. And I'm going to tell you something else. Why did Greece and Rome do this? They did it because they understood the vulnerability and the susceptibility of Hebrew Israel to gravitate to idolatry. That's why they did it. But we live in a time in which that knowledge has increased. We are living in the day of the book of Daniel being opened. He said that in Daniel's day, a day would come when the books, when knowledge would increase. Well, we are a part of that period of time in which knowledge has increased, and the eyes of our understanding now have become what? Opened. He also said that in the places that I'm going to disperse you to the four corners of the earth, he said, it is there that you will search for me and you will find me. We have sought, we have searched, and we have found him. I found him in the year 2007 when I thought I knew him teaching and preaching a Christian Greek doctrine. I thought I knew him. He let me know, Robert, you don't know anything. And he turned me around, spun me around, and pointed me in a direction and showed me I said something. And what I said it was a permanent regulation throughout all your generations. And when I heard that in my spirit, I began to question, well, how do you discredit permanent? How do you erase permanent? How do you take permanent out of play? And if the Most High said it was permanent, how do you erase the words of the Most High and said what he said is not right? How can you have... Watch your mouth, Robert. I can say this. How can you have Weibos big enough to contradict what the Most High has said? That's bold. That's arrogant. So he brought me back. And while I was studying the Mitzvahs this week, he took me to Devarim chapter 4 and Psalms 119. He said, now I'm going to show you what my Torah is. This is what my Torah is. This is what I declare to the kings, that you are to write down for your own self, your Torah. You're to write down these mitzvahs, these rulings, these precepts, these ways, these instructions that I'm giving you. Because these instructions, kings, are the way we're going to run my kingdom that I'm giving you the authority to have rulership over. Verse 22, Psalms 119. Remove scorn and contempt from me, because I observe your instructions. Even when princes sit and plot against me, your servant does what? Meditates on your laws. Also, your instructions are my delight. They are my counselors. I told you my ways, and you answered me. Teach me your laws. Make me understand the way of your precepts, and I will meditate on your wonders. Now, the question becomes, how do I do all this? And how does David do all this? Well, he does all this because he has them written down, and he knows where they are, so he can focus on them and meditate on them. I submit to you today that I have looked at several writings that have been presented by the Ashkenazi Jews concerning the mitzvahs of the Most High. And they told me that the Most High had 613 of them. However, in none of their capitulations of the mitzvahs, none of them agree with each other. They're not in sync. The next question the Most High asked to me, he's kind of talking to me like he talked to Job last night. Since you're so wise, answer me this question. Who told you there was 613? Did I tell you that? Did I write it? Huh? Did I write anywhere in Bereshit to Devarim, did I write any number that said to you there were 613? Did I say that? Did any of the prophets tell you that there were 613? So who told you that? You're wise, Robert. Answer me. Who told you that? I said, Father, those people that want to be us, who you've used as the instruments to preserve for us our language and our Torah, told us that. And they're not even in sync with their own selves. So I can't believe now anything they have to say. Cohen Appleton, I applaud you because you stopped teaching the Torah portions and you brought us full circle to understand what First Tabernacle Fellowship is. It's a Hebraic learning institution. And we have been directed from day one to this day by the hand and the Spirit of the Most High. He directs us and he tells us what we are supposed to say and what we are supposed to teach. And now he's opened up our eyes so that we can see that the major teaching that we need to focus on are his instructions, his laws, his precepts, which he calls the Torah. Because if we don't understand those, then we don't understand how to live in his kingdom. Now you say, well, why is this important? They're not all in play in this exile. No, they're not. But I'm going to submit something to you. You and I are made up of three components. We are made of body, soul, spirit. The body is only the house which is not going to be carried into the next day. We happen to be living in the sixth day. He's given us a body to reside in the sixth day. The house is going to dust. The spirit is going back to the one who gave it to us. The soul acts as the hard drive for who man really is. And everything, every thought, every idea, everything that we are, and everything that we have done is written on the hard drive of our soul, which does not die. You can go and you can resurrect an old hard drive, hook it up to what it needs to be hooked up, and it will upload everything that's on that hard drive. It's not destroyed, it's there. Our soul is the hard drive that makes us who we are. And we are governed by the mind of the Most High, by what our soul produces, what comes out of the heart. The heart and the soul are synonymous. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What comes out of you, your soul is the person of who you are, not what you look like. It's that which is intangible. So it is that when you and I go to the dust, when this house decays, spirit goes back to the Most High, the soul continues to live and is going to be revocated according to Daniel chapter 12. It's going to be revocated as we move into the seventh day, and your soul is going to be reattached to a body. That's what Daniel says. That's what Ezekiel says. So as you die and as you're resurrected, when you're resurrected, that which was in you starts to regenerate again. This Torah that we're learning now is going to be regenerated in the land, and it's going to be connected with that which is true as it's taught to us by the masters of Torah. And we're not going to have a problem accepting it because we've accepted it on this side of life. There are certain principles within Torah that we can't do here in exile. We don't have a temple. We don't have a kohanim. And we're not in the land. That doesn't nullify the things that are in Torah that we can do and that we can practice in this exile. I go back to the words of Allen Iverson. What are we talking about? We're talking about practice? Yeah, we're talking about practice. Why? Because I need my soul. I need my soul to know what these are. I need my soul to understand how to apply what the Most High has said. Because he's let me know that that is the central part. The Dalet. The Dalet is indicative of the door. The psalmist seeks the door that will open the way for him to achieve the path of truth. Where is truth? Truth relies in his Torah. Keep deceitful ways far from me and favor me with your Torah. I choose the way of trust. I set your rulings before me. I do what? I cling to your instructions. Yahweh, don't let me be put to shame. I will run the way of your mitzvahs, for they have broadened my understanding. The Hay. The Hay is a letter that stands for Yahweh's infallible name. As you have known, its numerical value is 5, which alludes to the foundation of the written law. In the Hay, verse 33, Psalms 119. Teach me, Yahweh, the way of your laws. Keep them. Keeping them will be its own reward for me. Give me understanding, then I will keep your what? Torah. But you got to give me understanding. I will observe it with all my heart. What am I going to observe? I'm going to observe your laws. I'm going to observe Torah. What do we do in this land? I observe the laws of this land so I can be a good citizen in it. I observe those. If I don't observe them, I'm not a good citizen. If we don't observe the laws and rulings of the Most High, we're not a good citizen in this kingdom. But we can't observe them if we don't know them. And I have to take the blame for that. The failure of not teaching them to you the way that I should have. But everything has its purpose and everything has its time. With understanding the past of where we've been, I now can understand this. So now we can come to a point where we collectively as teachers can focus on the principal things that are within the Torah, that are within the writings of Scripture, to focus on the principal thing, and that's teaching us the precepts, the laws, the rulings, and the ways of the Most High. Guide me on the path of your what? Mitzvahs, for I take pleasure in them. Avert the disgrace which I dread, for your rulings are good. See how I long for your precepts. In your righteousness, give me life. The Vav. As we look at the Vav, notice that it stands perfectly straight. And it is the word and. It's a connective letter that joins words when used as a conjunction. The letter is appropriate for the letter truth, because truth leads to the harmony of unity. The Vav. Don't take away completely my power to speak the truth. Don't take away my power to speak the truth. For I have put my hope in your rulings, and I will keep your Torah always. Forever and ever I will go wherever I like, for I have sought your precepts. What? Don't take away from me my complete power to speak truth. Where is truth? It's in your rulings and it's in your Torah. That's the only place it resides. It doesn't reside anywhere else. I will delight myself in your mitzvahs, which I have loved. I will lift my hands to your mitzvahs, which I have loved. And I will do what? Meditate on your laws. But I can't meditate on something that I'm not looking at. Question for you, okay? And I I use DMV because DMV is probably one of the only law books that we have to spend any time in periodically to go to get our license renewed. Okay? So what do? You either go online or you go get the book, right? What do? You read it, you meditate on it, you take it into your conscious mind, so when you go down and take the test, you can answer the right questions, right? Same thing with the Most High's teachings and laws. We have to produce a document so we can always put them before us, so we have something to refer to, so that we can do what David is saying: meditate on your laws. All right. I don't know where I'm in time. I don't want to be here 2 hours, but we're going to take a few of these, and I'm going to stop probably before I get through all of them. With that being the background, we continue on with Mitzvah number 284, Vayikra, chapter 24, verse 15. The prohibition to curse Yahweh. Tell the people of, and by the way, this particular mitzvah is not on anybody's list. Do you think it's important? You think it's important? It's not on any of their lists. When you see an asterisk up here at the top, I'm referencing the fact that what I'm getting ready to tell you does not come from any of the lists that the Ashkenazis have promoted in terms of these 613 mitzvahs, which I'm now discrediting to say that there aren't 613, there are more. Then tell the people of Israel, whoever curses his God will bear the consequences of his sin. And whoever blasphemes the name of Yahweh must be put to death. The entire community must stone him. The foreigner as well as the citizen is to be put to death if he blasphemes the name of the Most High. How do we do that? Well, it's not easy to damn Yahweh. Not easy to say that. That don't work. But the blasphemy, he told Israel, you blaspheme my name amongst the people by the way you live. You call yourself my people, but you're living like hellions. And by living like hellions and like you are, you're blaspheming my name. Now, here's the deal. The first thing a sinner would tell a Christian that acts stupid is what? I thought you were a Christian. Or I thought you were saved. That's the first thing they say. Yahweh says that when you act outside the parameters of the mitzvahs and the Torah, the precepts, the ways, and the instruction that I'm giving you amongst the nations, you blaspheme my name. Therefore, there is a prohibition to do that. The Zayin. How did I get there? Wait a minute. Did I do the Zayin? I didn't, did I? I don't know how that mitzvah got there. Zayin is the 7th number in the Aleph Bet, and it is associated with the word remember, for keeping of the Shabbat. If we are able to be attentive to the first 7, we need to check our spelling, don't we? To the first 7 consonants, that means we study for understanding the mitzvahs, and we do kindness to the poor, and we cherish the name of Yahweh, we will be blessed with having all of the physical needs, all of our physical needs provided. If we do this, if we live by what he says we should live by, you will have all of your physical needs provided. I got a question for the house. Are you homeless? Are you hungry? Are you naked? Do you have provisions? Well, he said, I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. What's the criteria? Righteous. Where does righteousness come from? Righteousness comes to Israel out of his precepts, his rulings, his ways, his instructions, and Torah. You never read anywhere where King David was poor. You never read anywhere where Abraham was poor. You never read anywhere where Yaakov was poor. You never read anywhere where any of these men were homeless and had to go outside and beg for anything. You never read in any context when Israel was walking righteous before the Most High. You never read any context where Israel wasn't blessed and had everything they needed to have. As a matter of fact, Cohen Appleton always reminds me, Israel was wealthy and had it all. Remember your promise to your servant, to which you have given me hope. I am not turned away from your Torah. Yahweh, keep in mind your aged-old rulings. In them I take comfort. I will remember your name, Yahweh, at night, and I will do what? Observe your Torah. This comfort has come to me because I observe your what? Precepts. What's he still talking about? He's still talking about mitzvahs. Okay. We're back to the mitzvahs again. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint, but that's okay. All the information is there. Mitzvah number 285. Once again, this is one that's not on anybody's list. The obligation to put to death a person who strikes another person, killing him. Anyone who strikes another person and kills him must be put to death. The rule that governs this mitzvah is written in Bamidbar, chapter 35, verse 22 through 34. 2 or 3 witnesses come into play. However, if the issue is by accident, the city of refuge is in play if the death was an accident. So if I strike somebody accidentally or something accidentally happened, then the city of refuge comes into play. Otherwise, a person who kills another person must be put to death. Mitzvah number 286, the obligation to make restitution when one strikes an animal and kills it. Anyone, and this is not on anybody's list. If you see the asterisk, I don't need to keep repeating this, but if you see the asterisk on the screen, that means that the mitzvah that's up there doesn't reside on any of the Ashkenazi's list. Anyone who strikes an animal and kills it is to make restitution life for life. Would you not say that's a mitzvah? Absolutely. The Most High said it. He's given us instructions for it. Mitzvah number 287, Vayikra 24, 19 through 20, the obligation to render restitution equivalent to the injury caused. If someone injures his neighbor, what he did is to be done to him. Break for break, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, whatever injury he has caused, the other person is to be rendered to him in return. This evaluation is done by the Haggadah Kohanim, just as in Bamidbar chapter 35, 22 to 34. So when he talks about an eye for eye, he's not talking about go pluck their eye out and a limb for limb, break the limb. He's talking about restitution. The restitution for the injury that's taken place must be equivalent to what the injury has happened to the person. For example, let me give you a modern day example. If somebody does injury to you, you have the right to take them to court and sue them. And you sue them for the monetary amount for which that the injury has cost you. So if it's cost you $2,000, you go into small claims court and you make a filing, and you file for a $2,000 claim against the person who has injured you to pay that injury cost that has caused you to get your situation straightened out. That's what this law is all about. Mitzvah number 288, Vayikra 25:2, the obligation to allow the land to rest. Yahweh spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. He said, tell the people of Israel, when you enter the land I'm giving you, the land itself is to observe its Sabbath rest. For Yahweh, 6 years you will sow your fields, 6 years you will prune your grapevines and gather their produce. But in the 7th year is to be a Sabbath of complete rest for you in the land. Sabbath for Yahweh, you will neither sow your field nor prune your grapevines. This mitzvah right here is in play in this exile. If you own land and you plant crops and you do things, then as a Hebrew Israelite, as a Hebrew individual, you're supposed to follow this particular rule that is listed there. And when you'll see in the end, your crops and what you have planted will be in abundance, and they will be healthy, and they will be fruitful. Mitzvah number 289, the prohibition to reap aftergrowth during the 7th year, the Shemitah year. You're not to harvest what grows by itself from the seeds left by your previous harvest, and you're not to gather the grapes of your unintended vine. It is to be a year of complete rest for the land. Mitzvah number 290, Vayikra 25:8, the obligation to count 7 cycles of sabbatical years. You are to count 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, that is 49 years. The underlying purpose of this mitzvah is the preparation for the Yovel year 50, in which the ancestral land is returned to its original owners. This particular mitzvah can only apply in the land, since the land does not belong to us. And if you were an individual who happened to own land in Israel, and by some reason you had to sell it to a foreigner or to another individual because you could no longer keep it, in this Yovel year of 50, the land reverts back to its original owner. Mitzvah number 291, the Vayikra 25:19, the obligation to sound the shofar on Yom Kippur of the Yovel Jubilee year. Then on the 10th day of the 7th month, on Yom Kippur, you are to sound a blast on the shofar. You are to sound the shofar all through your land. Mitzvah number 292, Vayikra 25:10, the obligation to sanctify the Yovel year. And you are to consecrate the 50th year, proclaiming freedom throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It will be a Yovel to you. You will return everyone to the land he owns, and everyone is to return to his family. Meaning now, if you sold one of your family members out for service, then in this 50th year, that family member and the land is to return back to his own family, and the land goes back to the family. Mitzvah number 293, Vayikra 25:11, the prohibition to work the land to reap the aftergrowth. At the 50th year will be a Yovel year for you, in the year that you sow, the harvest that what grows by itself, or gather the grapes. You are not to sow, harvest what grows by itself, or gather the grapes of unintended vines, because it is a Yovel. It will be holy for you, whatever the field produces will be food for all of you. Once again, this is in the land. Once again, this is also in exile, that if we had property and land, we're growing things, we have to allow this procedure to be played out. Mitzvah number 295, the prohibition to exploit your neighbor. Not on anybody's list. If you sell anything to your neighbor or buy anything from him, neither of you is to exploit the other. Would you say that's a commandment? Yeah. I mean, if this happens to us, we don't want to be exploited. You know, we'll fight over this. This we're not going. There'll be a fight over this. If I found out about it, oh, we fighting. Yeah. Mitzvah number 296, by Equal 25 and 17, the prohibition to take advantage of each other. Thus you are not to take advantage of each other, but you are to fear your Elohim, for I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Don't take advantage of each other. Exploiting is one process. Taking advantage of each other is another whole nother action. Mitzvah number 297, by 25, 23, prohibition to sell the father's land. The land is not to be sold in perpetuity because it belongs to me. You are only foreigners and temporary residents with me. 298, by 25, 24, the obligation to carry out the laws of sole family properties. Therefore, when you sell your property, you must include the right of redemption. Now, let me pause here for a minute. This word redemption and everything that is associated with it has to do with that which is quantitative. It's physical. You can see it. It's quantitative. So when somebody tells you that somebody redeemed you, what's the quantitative visual aspect of what's taken place? What does it mean? Oh, I was redeemed by the blood of. What's the quantitative thing that you can see that has actually happened? Nothing. Nothing. There's no change. There's no difference. But redemption is always going to be something that's quantitative, as it was with Ruth, Boaz, and the words escaping me again. The Redeemer who redeemed the land that was brought before that particular situation. Everything about redemption is quantitative. You can measure it, you can see it. But if we talk about I was redeemed by the blood of somebody, that's not quantitative. You can't see that. There's nothing visual about it. When you look up this word redeemed, in every context of Hebrew scripture, it's always going to be quantitative. It'll be measurable. Mitzvah 299, right? 25, 29 to 30, carry out the laws of houses in walled cities. Once again, this is in the land. If someone sells a dwelling in the walled city, he has 1 year after the date of sale in which to redeem it. Once again, you see that word redeem, and you see that the aspect of it is quantitative. It's talking about a building. It's talking about something that's visual. For a full year, he will have the right of redemption. But if he has not redeemed the dwelling in the walled city within the year, then the title in perpetuity passes to the buyer through all his generations, and it will not revert in the oval year. So as we look at these mitzvot, does anything come to mind? Does anything strike you as interesting about the land in the Messianic era? Does anything strike you as being interesting? Huh? It kind of suggests to us that we're going to be in cities. There are going to be walled cities. There's going to be fields. There are going to be houses. We're going to carry on business and activities just like we carry on today, but there's a governance and a laws that prescribe how that's supposed to take place. And if we violate them, oops, we don't get a chance to go to court and file a lawsuit. The law is going to tell you exactly what you're supposed to do, and if you don't do it, oops. The fields and the open land around the cities may not be sold because that is their permanent possession. Mitzvah 301, Vayikra 25:35, the obligation to support the poor. If a member of your people has become poor of your people, so that he can't support himself among you, you are to assist him as you would a foreigner or a temporary resident, so that he can continue living with you. Do not charge him interest or otherwise profit from him, but fear your Elohim, so that your brother can continue living with you. Now he's talking about Hebrew Israel. Can somebody give me some water? We got any in the house? So the issue here is that our responsibility, once again, is to whom? To Israel, the household of faith. We're responsible for taking care of the poor among us. Fortunately, we don't have the situation and the necessity to have to do that. We have some people that are in a bad way, but they're being cared for and they're being taken care of. If they weren't, then it would be our responsibility to do that. But I got to tell you something. With the monies that we have coming in through the door, we just be able to have enough money to pay the rent and not take care of anybody. That's the reason why the Most High has given us the responsibility for Israel to do what? To take care of Israel by our contributions and our giving and our tithing and our offerings. Oh, by the way, tithing and offerings only apply to Israel. They don't apply to the nations. He didn't write that law for the nations. He wrote that law for Israel. Vayikra number 302. Vayikra 25:37. The prohibition to lend on interest to a fellow Hebrew. Do not take interest when you loan him money, or take a profit when you sell him food. So once again, gets back to the law of not taking advantage of each other. Mitzvah 303, Vayikra 25:39. The prohibition not to have Hebrew servant do menial slave work labor. If a member of your people has become poor among you and sells himself to you, do not make him do the work of a slave. Rather, you are to treat him like an employee or a tenant. He will work for you until the year of Yovel. So there's this consciousness with Israel to treat each other with fairness, and don't make them do stuff that, you know what I mean? Y'all know what I mean. You know what the Most High means. Mitzvah 304, Vayikra 25:42, the provision to sell a Hebrew on the auction block. Wow. Bet you didn't know that one was there, did you? For they are my slaves, whom I bought out of the land. They are, and this word slaves, by the way, is a bad translation. It should say, for they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore, they are not to be sold as slaves. So there's two word differences there. Servants and slaves are different people. I don't go to a hotel and see the people that come in to tidy up my room. I don't see them as slaves. They're servants of the hotel, and they're servants to me to make my way of life and staying there well. And I don't treat them, or do I talk to them like they're slaves. Do this, do that, do that, do this. You're kind. You ask a question. Can you do? Will you please do? We don't demand them to do anything. Why? Because they're servants. They're not slaves. You treat a slave that way. That's the way the Europeans in this nation have treated the Most High's people. He's telling us, don't do that. Mitzvah 305, Vayikra 25:43, the prohibition to make a Hebrew slave perform harsh labor. It's almost the same as the other. Don't treat him harshly, but fear Yahweh. 306, Vayikra 25:46, the prohibition to treat your Hebrew slave harshly. There's a double one there. But as far as your brothers, the people of Israel, are concerned, you are not to treat each other harshly. Sometimes they double up. And you know what that means. Mitzvah 307, Vayikra 26:1, the prohibition to make for yourselves any idols. You are not to make yourselves any idols, erect a carved statue, standing stone, or place any carved stone anywhere in your land in order to bow down to it. For I am Yahweh, your Elohim. 308, Vayikra 26:2, the obligation to keep the Sabbath and revere the temple. Keep my Shabbats and revere my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. Now he's talking about what? In the land, the temple, and things of that nature that are holy to him. And that's our conclusion. I did get them all. That's the conclusion of the Numbers 284 through 308 to the 26th chapter of Vayikra. So what I shared with you today is very, very important. And that is, after today, we should have a clear understanding what Torah is. They are what? Precepts, laws, rulings, statutes. What was placed in the Holy of Holies on the tablets? Laws, precepts, rulings, and statutes. What did Moshe tell Israel to do, then make a copy of? These laws, these rulings, and these statutes and the instructions that I have given you today. Make a copy of it. He called it what? The Torah. Everything outside of his laws, rulings, statutes, instructions, ways, and rulings are simply a history of how Israel has functioned with the Most High. That history was not in the tabernacle, and it wasn't placed in the Ark of the Covenant. What was placed in the Ark of the Covenant is Torah, laws, rulings, precepts, instructions, and ways for Israel to conduct themselves. King David says, I meditate on these day and night. I say to you, Most High, teach me. So what we're going to have to do moving forward is we're going to have to highlight and make sure that we teach the Torah as we should. Not saying we haven't done a bad job on what we've done a good job. What we've done in the past has brought us to this, so that we can understand where we are with the Most High. Once again, we have our podcast that we like for you. If you're listening to it, you have friends that you want to pass it on to, encourage them to listen to the podcast. You can get the podcast on podbean.com, or you can also get it on iPod if you have an Apple iPhone. Remember that just because you're not here in the house, it does not delete your obligation for support for that which you are receiving as it comes out of this house through the stream or other medias to reach you. If you're gaining insight and you're being blessed by what's being taken place, then we have an obligation to support where it's coming from. So I submit to you, please send your tithing and send your offerings in so that First Tabernacle can continue to function. Not to say that we're not, because the Most High is always going to make a way. And I'm not going to preach to you and tell you that sending your tithes, you're going to be blessed and you're going to get a check in the mail. I don't have a clue that that's going to happen. But I do know that the obligation of Israel is to support Israel. And we are Hebrew Israel. And I say to you, Shalom. Yarekaka, Yahweh v'ishmeraka, Ya'er, Yadai, Panai v'leka, v'kanuka. Yasai Yahweh l'panai v'leka, v'yasham l'kash shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his face toward you and give each and every last one of you peace. May you have a blessed week.